PI report. The Dow Jones down there, it was more than 4%. It's just less than 4%. So let's listen to President Biden as he kind of connects how our economy is doing with what his Inflation Reduction Act may change.
That doesn't mean I'm going to speak any longer. Folks, welcome to the White House, everybody. And thank you, Levette, for this. This law is for you and for the millions of people like you, good, decent, hard-working Americans. And how about James Taylor, a voice that heals our soul and unites a nation and a good friend? I don't know where James is probably smart enough to be under the shade of the tree over there, or I've taken off. But James, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're joined by many champions for the American people. The first one of my best champions, is the First Lady, Jill Biden. I thought she was teaching, but she's here. Vice President Harris, who's not only a great vice president, but become a great friend. And the second gentleman, as well as Speaker Pelosi, and Leader Schumer, and Joe Manchin. Joe, thanks for sticking with what you said you'd do. Appreciate it. And the committee chairs who worked for almost 2 years to make this law real. And all the House and Senate Democrats who stood together and never, ever, ever gave up. This couldn't have happened without every single one of you, and that's in a literal sense in the Senate. Every single one was required because the other team didn't want to play. And all our distinguished guests, CEOs, advocates, activists, thank you for joining us. And what a great day. Exactly 4 weeks ago today, I signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law, a single most important legislation passed in the Congress to combat inflation, and one of the most significant laws in our nation's history, in my view. I said it then, and I'll keep saying it. With this law, the American people won, and special interests lost. Say it again. The American people won, and special interests lost. Folks, we're going to lower prescription drug costs, lower health insurance costs, lower energy costs for millions of families. I'm going to take the most aggressive action ever, ever, ever to confront the climate crisis and increase our energy security, ever in the whole world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're going to build a future, the future, here in the United States of America, with American workers, with American companies, with American-made products. And after years of some of the biggest corporations in the United States paying zero in federal income tax, they'll now have to begin to literally pay their fair share. Today offers proof that the soul of America is vibrant, the future of America is bright, and the promise of America is real. It is real. It is real. This is an extraordinary story being written today in America by this administration as I step all over my coat. Good thing my mom's not around. But look, you're an awful lot of brave allies out there in the Congress. You took a lot of heat, and by so many determined advocates and activists all across the country. And as I look out on this lawn, I see leaders who made the government of America begin to work again, work for the people, not special interests, for the people. Folks, look. Elected officials who stood up to the millions of dollars in attack ads from special interests, business leaders who were willing to endure the criticism of many of their colleagues, and so many people who fought for years to lower prescription drug prices and tackle the climate crisis. This is your victory. This is your victory. And that's a fact. And you deserve a huge round of applause. Give them applause, all these people who stood up. Every one of them. And let's hear it for the workers in the labor unions, mayors and local officials, environmental activists, students and young people, advocates for senior citizens and families. This is what it looks like when the American government works for the people. When we tell the powerful interests, no, you're not going to get your way. This time, not this year, not this time, not now. I say to some of my colleagues who've been around how long we've been fighting pharma, how long we've been taking on these interests. From the time I got to the Senate 720 years ago. I'm serious. Think about it. Let's be honest. Passing this law wasn't easy. I proposed as soon as I got here, basically. And I've said that day that I was determined to work with Republicans. And I've done that on historic laws like the infrastructure law. Republicans came across the aisle and they've worked with us. And we got it done. Over $1.2 billion to reshape this nation's infrastructure. The CHIPS and Science Act and the PACT Act for veterans and their families. In fact, I think it's fair to say we've achieved more bipartisan agreement in these nearly 2 years in my presidency than anyone thought was even remotely possible when I entered office. So I thank the Republicans who stood up. And I'm proud of it. It's been good for the country. But I believe Republicans could have and should have joined us on this bill as well. After all, this bill cut costs for families, help reduce inflation at the kitchen table, because that's what they look at, how much are their monthly bills and how much do they have to pay out for their necessities. And it gave them just a little more breathing room, as my dad would say. This bill will lower the deficit. This bill alone is going to lower the deficit by $300 billion over the next decade, because it's going to pay less for prescription drugs. And that's on top of the $350 billion we reduced the deficit my first year, $350 billion reduction. And for this fiscal year, $1.5 trillion reduction in the deficit. So I don't want to hear it anymore about big spending Democrats. We spend, but we pay. Ladies and gentlemen, the last guy had this job. Well, let me put it this way. This bill finally delivers on a promise that I've made to the American people for decades. But Republicans choose not to join us. In the end, every single Republican voted against this historic law. So it fell to the Democrats to meet this moment and deliver for the American people. And that's exactly what we did. We pay more for our prescription drugs than any developed nation in the world. Let me say that again. In America, we pay more for prescription drugs than any developed nation in the world. And there's no rhyme or reason to that. For years, so many of us have been trying to fix this problem. But for years, Big Pharma blocked Medicare from negotiating lower drug prices. But not this year. Not this year. This year, the American people won, and Big Pharma lost. Now, Medicare will have the power to do what so many Democrats and Republicans in the past talked about doing: lower prescription drug prices. And seniors will see their out-of-pocket costs for their prescription drugs limited to $2,000 a year. They cannot pay a penny more than $2,000 a year, no matter how high their drug costs are, whether for cancer drugs or other drugs that can raise up to $70,000, $80,000 a year based on need. A maximum yearly cost of $2,000. And if you're on Medicare and you have diabetes, your cost of your insulin will be $35 for every insulin. And we wanted to cut the cost for insulin for everyone, including the hundreds of thousands of children with type 1 diabetes. I'll not ask for a show of hands, but I bet a lot of you out there have diabetes or your children do. But Republicans blocked limiting that cost to $35 for children. It only cost $10 for this prescription to be made and packaged. $10. And drug companies charge families about 30 times more than that for every vial of insulin. Look, I'm deadly earnest about this. Imagine being a mom or a dad. Looking at your child, you know that needs an insulin to live, and not having the money to pay for it. Not a joke. Think about it. Think about what you'd think about at the time. Think about how you'd feel if you didn't have the insurance and didn't have the money. It's wrong. It's not who we are, and we're going to fix that too. We're going to come back at it and lower the cost of life-saving insulin for children and families as well. Last year, a family of 4 saved $2,400 through the American Rescue Plan, which I've signed into law. And this new law also locks in place the one we passed a month ago, the one we're here for today. It's going to lower health care premium costs for families and get their coverage under the Affordable Care Act by about $800 a year. Folks, for decades, climate deniers have blocked any meaningful progress and delaying and just pretended there wasn't a climate crisis. Remember back in 1989, I introduced the legislation about climate. No one wanted to hear it. I mean, no, not many wanted to hear it. But guess what? This year, nobody can deny there's a crisis. I have flown in a helicopter with governors of 5 states over this last year over the fires and the burning tundra, the burning forest. And guess what? More land, Gov, has been destroyed in the United States of America than the entire your state of New Jersey from top to bottom. That's how much land has been wiped out. And we have drought. The Colorado River is becoming a stream. So much is happening that nobody can doubt. Nobody can any longer doubt that the climate crisis is real, and we're beginning to respond to it. But folks, nobody ever in history, nobody this year, the American people won, the climate deniers lost, and the Inflation Reduction Act takes the most aggressive action to combat climate, as the speaker said, ever. Over $360 billion. Folks, it offers working families thousands of dollars in energy savings with tax credits and rebates to buy new and efficient appliances. Weatherize their homes, saving hundreds of dollars a year because they're not going to have the heat seeking out through the windows or doors or the air conditioning. It provides tax credits for purchasing heat pumps, rooftop solar, electric stoves and ovens, and so much more. It gives a tax credit up to $7,500 to buy a new electric vehicle or a fuel cell vehicle made in America. And for the first time, you can get a tax credit if you buy a used electric vehicle. American automobile companies and American labor are committing billions of dollars and a great deal of hard work and ingenuity to make electric vehicles and batteries. Because of the infrastructure law, we're going to have 500,000 electric charging stations on our highways across America installed by the IBEW. And they're all going to be made in America. This law will create good-paying union jobs, increase energy security. By the way, I keep talking about union jobs. I'm not anti-business. I'm a capitalist. But here's the deal. The reason I push everyone to use union labor is because they're the most skilled labor in the world. The end of the day, let's hear this out for real. The end of the day, you pay a little more to get the best, but it lasts a lot longer, it's a lot more certain, and it does things that nobody else can do. And by the way, when I hear people say, Biden, you're talking about union, and what about all these people go to college? Guess what? Try being a IBW member that introduced me. 5 years of apprenticeship. 5 years, like going back to college plus a year. 5 years. You're getting paid, but you're not getting paid a regular salary. It takes 5 years to qualify. So folks, let's give them credit for what they deserve. They're not only good at what they do, they work like hell to get to be able to do what they do. Look, and this legislation is going to help us triple wind power, unleash American manufacturing to own the global market on electric vehicles. We're going to fight the environmental justice and create clean energy jobs and apprenticeships in frontline, fence-line communities that have been smothered by the legacy pollution. Tommy, Senator Carper, I was going around today meeting the people, a lot of people out here inside. And one woman said, I'm from Delaware. Remember Route 9? Tommy don't know what Route 9's about. It's one of those fence-line communities where all of the pollution, all those factories. You know, I grew up in a little town called Claymont, Delaware, when I was a kid. And it's right on the Pennsylvania state line. We're the largest refineries in the world. More refineries and in that area than anywhere, including Houston at the time. Mom would drive me to school going to 3rd grade at Holy Rosary. She'd turn on, when there was a frost on the window, literally, you'd turn on the windshield wiper and there'd be an oil slick in the window. That's why we had the highest cancer rates of any state in the nation for a long time. Folks, they're the people under my leadership who are going to get help first. They're going to be the people helped first. And look, this is about a future made in America. And I mean it sincerely. For decades, the biggest corporations in America fought to block a fair tax code. Under my predecessor, there was a $2 trillion tax cut, not a penny of which was paid for. And it mainly benefited the wealthiest 1% of the American people and the biggest corporations. 55 of the Fortune 500 companies made $40 billion and then 2020 and didn't pay a single penny in federal income tax. But this year, even though some of the biggest companies in America flooded capital with lobbyists and money, they lost and the people won. No corporation will have to pay, they'll have to pay a minimum tax of 15%, just 15%. The days of billion-dollar companies paying zero in taxes is over, I promise you. And folks, let's be crystal clear about something. No one, I said when I was running, I said when I got elected, and I've said every month since then, no one earning less than $400,000 a year in America will pay a single penny more in federal taxes as long as I'm the president. That's a commitment I made in the campaign, a commitment I'm keeping. This law is going to make a big difference for middle-class and working-class families. Finally, giving them a little bit, as my dad would say again, breathing room. It's a big step forward for the country. But it won't surprise you to hear that many Republicans are saying, what's their platform when you ask them? You hear the Republican leader saying, undo everything we've done. The Republican leader in the House has already said the #1 economic priority if they win back the House is to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. #1. The guy in charge of electing Republicans in the Senate, Rick Scott of Florida, proposed a plan. I wish I had enough copies to hand, but go online and look at it. I really mean this is serious because it's going to make you're going to be hard for you to believe. Proposed a plan requiring Congress to vote on the future of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid every 5 years. It's up for reauthorization. And I want to remind you, you paid for your Social Security. Every single paycheck from the time you were a kid, you paid for it. So every 5 years, Congress gets to vote, change, cut, reduce, or eliminate the entirety of Social Security. And it's not just Social Security. Everything as Senator Scott wants, everything in the federal budget to be up for 5 years. Nothing permanent. Nothing. That includes veterans benefits.
President Biden there, Ray-Bans on, jacket off, and handheld microphone in hand as he delivers remarks about his Inflation Reduction Act at the White House, although this almost felt like it was a campaign event, which the White House will tell you it is not. This new law, of course, aims to lower prescription drug costs, combat climate change, and raise taxes on some billion-dollar corporations and reduce the federal deficit. But in touting the measure, President Biden heavily criticizing Republicans for not backing it.
It's, a victory lap if I ever saw one, seriously celebrating and touting what he hopes will be the outcomes of this law. However, on a day like today, that has been so tough for stocks, it's hard not to notice the sharp contrast. This This victory lap, this speech comes as the latest consumer price index report sent Wall Street down a downward spiral. The Dow Jones dropped around 4%. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ also took losses. This is the worst single day on Wall Street since June of 2020, after the pandemic had already made plenty of impact.
Yeah,
Emil Michael joins us now. He's the chairman and CEO of DPCM Capital and a former